I grew up on a tropical island in the Caribbean called Puerto Rico. And in the middle of that island, I was raised in a small town in the mountains by an incredibly tight-knit family. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings would get together almost every weekend to share stories and laugh and just enjoy each other's company. As kids, we spent our days running around those mountains, climbing trees, picking fresh fruit off the vine. We were surrounded by this immense beauty, and we explored all of it. My family also owned the most beautiful orchid and hibiscus farms on the island. People would come from all over to admire and buy the incredible hybrids that my grandfather and his sister created. I don't know if it was because of the vast beauty I was surrounded by, or because my family always encouraged me to ask questions and explore the world around me, but I developed a voracious curiosity. The Collins English Dictionary defines curiosity as an eager desire to know, inquisitiveness, and that defined me perfectly. I wanted to see and know and do everything. I had the best childhood that any curious kid could want. But then life went on. I grew up. Eventually, those orchid and hibiscus farms went out of business. I left that paradise to finish high school overseas, went off to college, started my career as an Air Force pilot, got married, had 4 sons. And as rewarding as so many of those life experiences were, I woke up one day about 5 years ago and realized that I'd forgotten my childhood. I'd forgotten what it meant to be curious. Every dashed dream, every difficult circumstance, every failure, every doubt, every insecurity had led me to recede a little further into myself to the point where I had become blind to the beauty and wonder and connections all around me. What's worse is that my family and friends had no idea what I was going through. To them, I was the happy guy that was always smiling. But really, I was just going through the motions. I was actually in a dark and lonely place. And in that moment, I remembered a plant that we grew up with as kids in Puerto Rico. This plant goes by many names, and we called it moriviví, which in Spanish literally means I died, I lived. In English, this plant is also known as the shy plant or the shame plant. And when you touch it, it closes in on itself as a protective measure. And in doing so, it shuts out the very sunlight that it needs to survive. I saw so clearly in that moment that I was that plant. In an attempt to protect myself from life's often harsh touch, I'd closed myself off to the world around me. And in doing so, the sense of fullness, the sense of life that defined me in my youth was slowly dying away. And I determined in that moment that I would fight to regain what I had lost. And as I embarked on that journey, something interesting happened. It didn't take very long to realize that what I was going through wasn't at all unique. In fact, as I looked around me, I realized that we are that plant. We've lost the sense of curiosity that connects us to the world around us. We walk around with our earbuds in or on our phones or absorbed in our own stuff, and we shut out the world around us. Because in here, we are in control. In here, there's no conflict, there's no pain, there's no embarrassment, there's no risk, no failure. But in here, we're dying. We're closing ourselves off to the very thing we need to survive, to that connection, not only to other people, but to everything extraordinary around us. In acting like the shy plant, we've exchanged our curiosity for the comfort and perceived safety of our isolated and deadly bubbles. A recent Cigna study showed that 47% of Americans do not have meaningful interactions with another human being on a daily basis. Can you imagine? Roughly half of the people that you know, roughly half of the people in this room, do not have a meaningful connection with another human being every day. Chances are that some of us are even counted amongst that lonely 47% without even realizing it. Because we don't even notice our isolation in the midst of our busy lives. After all, we tell ourselves we're around people, or we try to convince ourselves that working nonstop can somehow fill the void of a lack of meaningful connection to what's around us. The problem is that loneliness is literally a killer. Loneliness increases the risk of health problems such as heart disease and has the same impact on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, making it even more dangerous than obesity. Feelings of loneliness often precede the onset of depression and alcoholism and increase the risk of suicide amongst young and old alike. The reality is, the effects of loneliness and isolation are not only devastating, but they're deadly. Now, I'm not sharing this data with you to scare you, but I'm trying to wake us all up to the fact that we're being confronted with an urgent issue that we have the power to control, because the solution rests in our choices. I believe that curiosity is a solution, that it is the antidote to loneliness and isolation. I believe that the choices that we make around curiosity are among the most important in our lives. And here's why. Curiosity is the gateway to connection, not only to other human beings, but also to the beauty and wonder around us. It gives us access to the fullest and most vibrant version of our lives, and ultimately, to the best version of ourselves. Researcher and author Brené Brown says, connection is why we're here. We're hardwired for it. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And without it, there is suffering. So if we're to take advantage of all that connection offers us, then I believe that we must fight our tendency to constantly exchange our curiosity for comfort and safety. But how? The truth is that I don't have a silver bullet answer, but I'd like to share with you what's worked for me and what I've observed has worked for so many others. Regaining your curiosity can start with something as simple as setting daily curiosity reminders. These are little triggers that pull us out of our busy lives and remind us and force us to really take in our surroundings. Every day on my daily commute, there's a moment when the metro bursts out of a tunnel into the open. And that's one of my curiosity reminders to stop whatever I'm doing, whether reading a book, doing a crossword puzzle, looking at my phone, whatever, and really take in what's around me. The sunrise, the trees, the grass, the birds flying overhead, the aircraft landing at Reagan, the Kennedy Center and the Washington Monument out in the distance. And I asked myself, what changed since yesterday? What surprised me? What do I feel as I take this in? Where are those birds flying? Some of those questions are profound, and some of them are meaningless and even silly. But this curiosity break gives me much needed perspective about my life. To me, this is about more than just being present or mindful, because the questions connect me to my surroundings in a vital way. They start to shed light on my issues and worries and fill me with an understanding that there's more to life than my own stuff. And that's a powerful thing. Perhaps the greatest curiosity tool, and my favorite, is the power of a simple, curious question. Now, we ask questions all the time. You pass your colleague in the hallway and you say, how's it going? And they give you the perfunctory fine, and 2 seconds later, you forgot you even saw the person. That's not a curious question. Curious questions have one essential ingredient. They're genuine. You actually want to know the answer. And your body language, your facial expression, your tone, all convey that fact. It also means that you haven't made an assumption or a judgment about what the answer will be. Socrates said that hubris is the enemy of curiosity. And I believe that one of the forms that hubris takes is judgment. And judgment is a curiosity killer. The most curious people I've ever met refuse to judge. Instead, they choose to give people the benefit of the doubt by asking curious questions. I can't tell you how many times a simple, curious question has resulted in the most fascinating conversation, or sometimes to something literally life-changing. About 12 years ago, my friend Brian and I went on a hiking weekend. Our wives were good friends, and they wanted us to get to know each other better, so we went. Brian was an 8th grade science teacher, and he loved what he did. He'd recently been recognized as the Rookie Teacher of the Year for his school district. So early in the weekend, I asked him, "What's your dream job, Brian?" And he said, "I would love to teach abroad." So I asked him if he'd ever heard of the Department of Defense school system, where American teachers travel all over the world to teach the children of military members. To my surprise, he said he'd actually looked into it, but he thought it was too hard to get selected. So I shared with him the immense impact that teachers had had on my life in that very school system. And I dared him to imagine what it would be like to change children's lives anywhere in the world. After that weekend, he applied, endured a very robust selection process, and he was in Japan with his family less than a year later. They've been having a great time in Japan ever since. And Brian's students are being impacted by a phenomenal teacher that they may have never met were it not for a simple moment of curiosity. Mine in asking a question, and his in being willing to imagine what could be. There are so many other great curiosity tools out there, like learning something new or forcing yourself to experience something out of your comfort zone. But ultimately, curiosity is about staying open to the unexpected moments in life, no matter how small. Let me share one last story with you to illustrate this. Not too long ago, I was on a long training run when I came upon an older man ahead of me on the trail. And as I passed by him, I could tell that he was trying to say something to me. I was kind of tempted to just wave and keep running with my earbuds in, but as you can imagine, my curiosity got the better of me. And as I took my earbud out, he said, "Excuse me, young man, would you run with me for a while?" And I was shocked that this man would ask a perfect stranger to run with him, and that he called me a young man. But I said, "Absolutely." And Jim instantly picked up his pace. And for the next 8 minutes or so, we ran and talked. And when his watch beeped, he thanked me for keeping him motivated. And I told him that he'd made my day. And as I finished my run home, I reflected on what had just happened. What if he hadn't dared ask me to run with him? What if I just waved and kept running with my earbuds in? What a missed opportunity that would have been. The conversation itself was nothing groundbreaking. But to this day, that run is still the most memorable one I've ever been on. And it was only possible because two people were curious enough to get out of their bubbles and were willing to make a connection and see what would happen instead. The fact is that there's people all around us that would love to have us run with them for a while. They don't have the courage to ask us. And we're running right past them with our earbuds in. To be fair, curiosity can seem really risky. It can make us feel exposed and vulnerable. I'll be honest, the angst I felt when I first started to make an effort to ask curious questions was palpable. Because I couldn't control the outcome, and that scared me. But curiosity also seems risky because we live in a society that values knowing. And choosing to be curious forces us to acknowledge that there are things we don't know. But the truth is that those feelings of risk are mostly in our heads. The rich connections I've experienced throughout my curiosity journey have proved that to me time and again. That being curious is well worth the risk. And that applies whether you're an extrovert or an introvert or anything in between. Years from now, when you look back at your life, how will you measure it? Chances are you won't remember each worry, each tear, each enticement to recede into yourself, but you will remember the beautiful things you saw, the people you ran with for a while, and the unexpected moments that infused you with joy and life. And that is worth your bold commitment to stay curious no matter what. Thank you.